Welcome to Night Sky, a place where calm stories help quiet the mind and gently guide you to sleep. If you're ending your day right now, allow yourself a moment of peace. Find a comfortable position, relax your shoulders, and take a slow, calm breath. Breathe in and slowly breathe out. Once again, breathe in and gently breathe out. If you enjoy falling asleep to stories like this, you can leave a like on this video. It helps more people discover peaceful bedtime stories. And if you'd like to return here each night, you can also subscribe to the channel. Now allow your thoughts to slow down and let the story gently carry you into a world of imagination where the night is quiet, safe, and filled with calm. Far from land, where no shore is visible anymore. No trees, no lights, where the sea becomes a single, endless expanse, and the sky and water meet in a thin, hazy line, so calm, so still, that it's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. A merchant ship sailed by, slowly, without haste, as if time itself flowed differently on its deck. The hull cut through the water softly, almost effortlessly. The waves spread out to the sides, gently, as if making way. The ship's wood breathed, quietly creaking, working in harmony with the water. Every joint, every beam, every rope knew their role. Through the sea, the masts swayed slowly, like tall trees swaying in the wind. The sails were taut, but not violently, rather softly, like a breath, rising and falling, in a rhythm that calmed everything around. Order reigned on deck. It wasn't a fast movement, nor frantic, but steady, confident. The sailors moved slowly, with experience. Their steps were heavy, but calm, as if each of them knew exactly where they should be and when. Their faces were tired, sunburned, weathered by the wind. But in their eyes, there was silence, that special silence of people who have spent too much time at sea. The merchants sat closer to the center of the deck, by the chests, locked, heavy, containing spices, cinnamon, cloves, dried fruit. Their scent wafted through the air, mingling with salt, and created something strange, warm, and peaceful, like a memory of home. The ship set sail many days ago, from the port of Syracuse, and ever since then, the sea has been kind. The waves were gentle, the wind was favorable, and the sky clear. The days passed slowly. Night turned into day, day into night, and it all happened like a dream. On that ship, there was also a boy, the youngest of them all. No one knew his name, or maybe they once knew it, but over time, it was forgotten. To everyone, he was just the boy. He didn't speak, and he didn't hear. He never heard. From the moment he was born, his world was different, silent, completely silent. No voices, no laughter, no screams. But it wasn't empty. It was full of movement, full of light, full of details that others didn't notice. As a child, he often sat on the shore, looking out at the sea. He didn't hear the waves, but he saw their rhythm. He saw how they rose as they fell, how the light reflects off their surface, how the colors changed. And in all of this, he found peace. People spoke, but to him, their words were just the movement of their lips, a gesture, an emotion. He learned to look, very carefully. He noticed the tension in their hands, changes in the eyes, the way someone moved. He understood more than others realized. After his parents died, He ended up at the port. There he learned a trade, hard work, without words, without explanations, only through observation. On the ship, he was nobody. He was given the worst tasks. He scrubbed the deck until his hands stung from the salt. He carried heavy ropes that weighed more than his own body, cleaned. He gathered. He got out of the way. The sailors laughed at him, but he didn't hear the laughter. They shouted, but he didn't hear their anger. Sometimes that was his strength, and sometimes loneliness, because silence can be peaceful, but it can also be very heavy. It was on the ship, too, the captain's daughter. She didn't belong to the world of sailors, and yet she was part of it. She moved differently than the others, calmly, more lightly, as if she didn't touch the deck with the same force, as if her steps were softer. She often went out on deck at dawn, when the air was still cool, and the light was just beginning to touch the sea. She would stand at the rail and gazed into the distance for a long time, in silence. It was then that she first noticed the boy, not when he was working, not when others were pushing him away, but then, when he paused for a moment, he stood by the ropes and watched the waves, not like someone who's working, but like someone who is listening. Though he couldn't hear, something in that image stopped her. For a moment she looked, without moving, as if she didn't want to disturb the moment. The next day, she walked closer, slowly, so as not to startle him. She held a cup of water in her hand. She handed it to him. Their hands touched for a brief moment. Warmth. Simple. Real. The boy looked at her, slightly surprised. In her eyes, there was no laughter. There was no contempt. There was no command. There was gentleness and something else. Curiosity. From that moment on, he began to notice her. He had always seen everything before, but now, his gaze kept returning to one place, to her. He didn't know what this feeling was. He didn't know the words, but he felt that it was different from everything else. Calmer, warmer, like light. That doesn't blind, but warms. One night, the sea ceased to be gentle. Not suddenly, not violently, but slowly, as if something deep within it had begun to change. The sky was covered with clouds, heavy, low. The moonlight disappeared, and the air grew thicker, damp, harder to breathe. The wind appeared suddenly, not as a breeze, but as a force. It struck the sails, tugged at the ropes. The ship rocked harder, the deck lilted. The waves began to rise. They weren't huge yet, but enough to disturb the calm, to create tension. The sailors moved faster. Their movements lost their calm confidence. A sense of haste appeared. Short gestures, sharp glances. The boy was on deck, as always, with a rope in his hands. His fingers clenched tightly, even though they were tired, slippery from the water. He watched. He always watched. He saw more than others. He noticed something. Tension in the sails. The uneven movement of the waves. Sudden jerks of the ropes. And then, it happened. One of the ropes, wet, taut, heavy, slipped out of the grip. With tremendous force, it sliced through the air, like a whip. She struck the boy, right in the back. His body tensed. The air escaped from his lungs. He fell onto the deck, hard, heavily. The wood was cold, wet. He took the blow without a sound, because his world had no sounds. But the pain was real, deep, spreading slowly. like a wave. For a moment, he couldn't move. He lay there, staring into the darkness of the sky. Raindrops fell on his face. One ere another, cold, relentless. A sailor ran past him. He only looked for a moment, briefly, without stopping, without help. Another tripped over his leg and pushed him away in irritation, like an obstacle, like something that shouldn't be lying there. The boy closed his eyes for a moment, not because of pain, but because of something else, something heavier. Loneliness. Slowly, very slowly, he stood up. His hands were trembling. His back burned with every movement, but he went back to work, as always, without a word, without protest, without waiting. Only one person stood motionless, the captain's daughter. She saw everything, every moment, every blow, every shove. Her hands clenched slightly, but she said nothing. She couldn't change what had happened, but that night, she did something else, something quiet, something important. When the storm subsided and the ship returned to its slow rhythm, she found him. He was singing on the side of the deck, leaning slightly, breathing calmly, though his body cell remembered the pain. She approached slowly. She didn't want to startle him. She sat down next to him, quietly. For a moment, she did nothing. She just was there. Then, she pulled out a piece of fabric, clean, delicate, and carefully. She touched his back. The boy flinched slightly, not out of fear, out of surprise. He looked at her. Their eyes met, for longer than before. There were no words, but there was understanding. She began to dress the wound, slowly, carefully, as if every movement mattered, as if she knew that she was touching not just the body, but something more. And then, for the first time, the boy felt something he had never felt before. Not pain, not fatigue, not silence, but warmth. The next day, the sea was different, too calm, too smooth, like a mirror. There were no waves, only gentle movements, like a breath that someone is trying to hide. The sky had a strange color, not blue, not grey, something in between, like blurred paint that can't make up its mind what it is. The air was heavy, dull. The sailors moved more slowly. They spoke less. They looked at the horizon, as if they were expecting something, as if they sensed something, but couldn't put it into words. The boy saw it too. He always saw it. He noticed the lack of wind. He noticed the tension in people's bodies. He noticed the silence, different than usual, not peaceful, but tense, as if something were about to happen. The captain's daughter stood at the rail, as always, but this me, her gaze was different, not calm, not pensive, alert. The boy looked at her. For a moment, their eyes met again, briefly, but long enough to feel that they both saw the same thing. Something was coming, and then a sound appeared. At first it was faint, almost imperceptible, like an echo of something very distant. The sailors raised their heads, one by one, as if someone had called them. The sound grew more beautiful, warmer, more familiar, like a memory that you can't quite grasp. It was a song, but not an ordinary one, not human, not of this world. The boy heard nothing, but he saw everything. He saw the sailors' faces change, how the tension faded, how calmness set in, a smile, as if each of them had found something they'd been searching for their whole lives. One of them took a step toward the ship's side, slowly, without hesitation. The other followed him, and another. The boy felt his heart racing. He didn't know why. But he knew that this wasn't normal, that something was wrong, that it was dangerous. He looked at the captain's daughter. She had heard the song too. Her eyes were different, so glassy, as if she were somewhere else, not here, not on the ship, not in this world. And then the boy understood. He was the only one who remained, the only one who hadn't heard, the only one who saw the truth. The boy stood motionless among people who were no longer themselves. Their movements were slow, smooth, as if they were floating in a dream. Their eyes did not look at the world. They looked somewhere beyond, where there was no ship, there was no sea, there was no danger, only a promise, something better, something they longed for. The boy didn't hear the song, but he saw its effect, and that was enough. He took a step forward, then another, faster. His breathing quickened. His heart was beating harder. He felt tension throughout his body. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper, instinct. The first sailor was already at the rail. His hands rested on the wood. He leaned forward slightly, as if he wanted to look down, as if something were calling him from the depths of the water. The boy caught up to him. He grabbed his arm, tightly. The sailor turned slowly. His face was calm, too calm. No tension, without awareness. The boy pulled him backward, but the sailor's body put up a fight, not violently, but stubborn, like someone who wants to go in one direction and sees nothing but that. The boy used all his strength. He pulled him away, step by step, and then he grabbed the rope and ed him up, quickly. Not exactly, but guardly. He turned around. The second one was already closer to the edge. The third was climbing onto the side. The fourth was already leaning toward the sea. The boy ran. He didn't stop. He didn't think. He acted. He pulled one away. He knocked the second one down. He grabbed the third one at the last moment. His body was already leaning toward the water for a split second. He almost disappeared. But the boy was faster. He grabbed him by the shirt. He yanked. They fell together onto the deck, hard, hard. His hands were starting to hurt. His muscles were trembling. His breathing was rapid, irregular. But he didn't stop. He looked toward the helm. And then he saw something that sent a chill through his body. The ship was turning, slowly, imperceptibly, but surely, toward the rocks. The boy ran to the helm. Every step was quick, but heavy, as if the air had grown thicker, as if the world itself were trying to stop him. The captain stood at the helm, but he was no longer the same man. His hands rested on the wheel, but they didn't control it. They let it turn, slowly, toward death. The boy grabbed the wheel, with a sudden movement, tightly, as hard as he could. The captain looked at him. His eyes were misty, as if he were looking, but not seeing. The boy shook him. Once, twice, harder. For a moment, something changed. The captain blinked. His gaze sharpened. And then, he saw rocks, sharp, hidden just below the surface, waves crashing against their edges, white foam, death. His breath caught in his throat. And suddenly, he came back. Together they grabbed the rudder. Together they began to turn it, slowly, with effort. The ship resisted. The wind was weak. The sails hung heavy. The boy let go of the helm. He ran to the ropes. His hands worked quickly, automatically. He knew these movements. He had repeated them hundreds of times. He pulled the sails in the opposite direction. He adjusted their angle. He tried to catch even the slightest breeze. He looked at the deck. And then he saw her, the captain's daughter. She was standing at the rail. too close. Her hands rested on the wood. Her body leaned forward slowly, as if something were pulling her. The boy froze for a split second, and then he started running. He ran faster than before, faster than ever. The deck was slippery, dangerous, but he didn't stop. She was already just out of reach. One more step, and she would have disappeared. The boy lunged. With all his might, he caught her at the last moment. Her body was light, but limp. She didn't struggle. She couldn't see him. He pulled her toward him, tightly, too gutly, as if he were afraid that if he let go, even for a moment, he would lose her forever. They fell together onto the deck. His back hit the wood again. The pain returned, but this time, it didn't matter. He looked at her. Her eyes were closed, peaceful, as if she were dreaming. He touched her face, gently, hesitantly, and then her eyelids fluttered. Slowly, she opened her eyes. She looked at him. She really looked at him. And in that single moment, everything came back. She saw his face, his tension, his fear, his struggle. She saw the truth. Her breathing quickened. She turned her head. She saw the others. She saw the rocks. And she understood. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. She took his hand for a moment, briefly, tightly. And then she stood up and she began to help. The ship was slowly moving away from the rocks. The wind returned, gentle, coarse, as if it weren't sure itself whether it could breathe yet. The sails began to move, at first lightly, then more confidently. The ship's wood creaked slowly, as if waking from a sleep. The singing stopped, not suddenly, slowly, like an echo that fades further and further away, until it ceases to exist. The sailors began to return to themselves. One by one, they opened their eyes. They looked around, confused, red, as if they had just woken from a very deep sleep. Some were cell-led to the masts. Others sat on the deck, holding their heads. The captain stood at the helm, this time for real. His hands were steady, but his breathing was still heavy. He looked ahead, at the sea, at the expanse that just a moment ago had been on the brink of death. And then he turned around and looked at the boy. There were no words in that look. There was no need for explanations. There was something more. Understanding, gratitude, and something that had never been there before. Respect. The boy stood still. His breathing finally slowed. His hands were still trembling slightly, but his body was slowly calming down. He looked out toward the sea. The same sea that sang for others. For him, it was only silence, but that silence saved them all. And then he felt someone's presence beside him. It was her, the captain's daughter. She stood next to him, quietly, without rushing. For a moment, they gazed out at the sea together. The wind ruffled her hair, gently, as if it wanted to say something, but it didn't use words. She turned her head away. She looked at him. This me, differently. Not like he was the guy from the deck. Not like someone invisible. Like someone who had just changed everything. She smiled, gently, calmly. The boy looked at her for a moment, unsure, as if he didn't know if this moment is real. And then he smiled too, very gently. They didn't need words. They never needed them, because what was between them had already begun. In their glances, in the silence, in brief moments that others overlooked. And now it became something more. The journey continued. But something has changed. Not in the sea, not in the wind, in the people. The sailors looked at the boy differently. They no longer called him over with just a gesture. They didn't give him the worst jobs without a second glance. Now, they nodded. They made room for him. Sons, they put a hand on his shoulder. Simple gestures, but meaningful. One evening, the captain approached him. The sun was setting. The sky was orange, calm, as if nothing had ever happened. The captain stood in front of him, and he did something he had never done before. He took off his glove and held out his hand. The boy looked at it. He hesitated for a moment, and then he shook it, tightly. The captain nodded, slowly, with appreciation. That was his way of saying it all. A few days later, the ship arrived at the port. People were weighing on the shore. Families, children, laughter, tears, life. The sailors disembarked one by one. They greeted each other. They hugged. The boy stopped on the deck. As always, at the very end. He didn't rush. He was never in a hurry. And then someone grabbed his hand. It was her. He looked up, surprised. She smiled, and she gently pulled him toward the exit, as if to say, "You're coming with me." They went down together, slowly, step by step. On the waterfront, the world was noisy, full of sounds, full of life. But for him, it was still silence, and it was in that silence he felt something new. Not loneliness, closeness. She didn't let go of his hand, not even for a moment. She looked at him once more, and then, very gently, she placed his hand on her heart. It was beating calmly, evenly, warm. The boy closed his eyes. For a brief moment, and for the first time in his life, he felt something that could have been a song. Not the one that led to death, but the one that leads to life. The sea, as always, remained mysterious. Somewhere far away, the sirens still sing, but not everyone has to listen to them, because sometimes it is silence that leads the way most safely. Close your eyes. Feel the gentle rocking of the waves, the warm breeze, and the calm breath of the sea, which carries you quieter and quieter, further and further, until you fall asleep.